10. And now we have been exposed to an approach to of understanding study 4. How could His Holiness come into existence from the Merkava Hatame Vaa Klipit, the chariot of unclean forces, considering that it is to an extreme degree removed from His Holiness? And how is it possible that does He supply it with everything it needs and maintains her existence? Indeed, first of all, it must first be ascertained what the real meaning of the unholy powers, and know that it is that great desire to receive the Holy One. And know that it is that great desire to receive that we spoke of, that it is the very thing that forms souls on the part of precisely the created in them, out of nothing, for therefore they are ready to receive all the filling contained in the intent of creation. It does not remain in the souls in the same form, for if it remained in them, the same, they would inevitably remain always separated from Him, for their qualitative. The difference would separate them from Him. And in order to overcome this distinction inherent in the vessels of souls, He created the totality of the worlds and divided into two systems, according to the meaning of what is written, on the day of happiness be happy, and on the day of unhappiness, and this is in contrast to what God created, Kohelet 7:14, namely, He created the four worlds of Abya Dikdasha, the worlds of Asalat, Bria, Yetzirah and Asya holiness, and, in contrast to them, the four worlds of Abya Ditame. The worlds of Asalat, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asya impurity. And He gave Harekan Lihashpia, altruistic desire, to the system of the worlds. Abi a Dikdasha, and He removed from them Haratzan Lukabel Luatzmo, desire to receive for one's own sake, as written below, in the introduction to Wisdom Kabbalah, in Paras 14-19, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, take a good look there. And gave it the system of the worlds of Abya Ditame, and because of this desire, they turned out to be different from the Creator and from all worlds of holiness. And for this reason, they are called Haklipit, unclean powers, by the name dead, as it is written, the sacrifices belonging to, i.e., offered, to the dead, Tehillim 106:28, such are also the sinners who reach for them, as it is written our sages, may the memory of them be blessed. The sinners in their lifetime are called dead, Midrash Rabbah, Lek 39:7. Also the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Brachet, p.18b, for the desire to receive, the inheritance them as opposed to the qualities of His Holiness separates them from the life of all, the living, i.e., from God, and they are to an extreme degree removed from Him because He is not inherent in any receiving, but only in altruistic motives, and the Klipit, unclean powers, have no altruism but only one desire to receive for the sake of self-gratification, and there is no contradiction greater than this. You already know that distance in the spiritual begins with a qualitative difference and ends by the opposite of the properties, which is extreme remoteness in the last degree. 11. And the worlds have descended to the place where this material world, that is, to the place where there will be Guf, the body, and Neshama, the soul, and Zman Kilkul V Tiken, the time of spoiling and correction, for the body, which is a desire to receive for its own sake, comes from its source in the creation's intent, as already mentioned, and passes through the system of Ha'alamat to Tameh, worlds of impurity. As it is written, a wild ass is born man, Yav, 11:12, and remains under the power of this system until he is 13 years old, and that is the time of corruption. And through the work of the commandments from the age of 13 onward, doing this is for the sake of pleasing his Creator, he begins to purify the desire for his own sake and gradually turns it into its opposite, motivated by altruistic motives, for in this way he begins to attract Nefesh K'dusha, holy soul, from its source in the conception of creation, and it passes through the system of Ha'alamat Dikdusha, the worlds of holiness, and it is clothed in a body, and this is the time of correction. And in addition to this, he begins to acquire the steps of holiness, emanating from the design of creation, which is in Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, until they help this man turns the desire to receive for its own sake, which is in him, into its opposite, so that it entirely becomes the Behinah, the qualitative essence, of the receiving for the sake of to give pleasure to his Creator, and not at all for its own benefit, and thus does that person acquire a qualitative similarity with his Creator, because receiving from altruistic motives is considered pure altruism, as it is written, in the Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Kiddushin, Folio 7, that if the bridegroom who participated in the rite of Kiddushin was an important person, then the bride would give him gift, and he would say, "By this you are sanctified." Then he receives for the sake of giving the pleasure of the giver to him. It is considered that he only gives to her. Study well what it is. It is written, see also or Shalom to page 11 of the Introduction to Wisdom of the Kabbalah, and then he completely to him, for in spiritual fusion, there is nothing other than a qualitative resemblance, as said our sages, may the memory of them be blessed. And how is it possible to cleave to him without being attached to his attributes? Sifriited Verum 11:22, make out what is written there. And in this way one becomes ready to receive fully the grace, pleasure and bliss contained in the design of creation. 12. Here we have given a proper explanation of the notion of correcting the desire to receive, given, to creatures, as an inalienable property in emanating from the intent of creation, for the Creator has prepared for them the two discussed systems, of worlds, discussed above, one against the other, through which the Nashamot, souls, pass and are divided into two categories of entities, Guf, body, and Nefesh, soul, clothed with each other, and, by virtue of the Torah and commandments, they will find themselves at the end of their development in such a state that they will turn the desire to receive into its opposite, the altruistic desire, and then they will be able to receive all the grace is destined for them, according to the design creation, and at the same time they will be honored unbreakable fusion with him. They will, through their work on the Torah and the commandments, to have a qualitative resemblance to their Creator. This is considered Gamer Hataiken of correction. And then, since there will no longer be the need for the unclean Sitra Akra, the other side, it will disappear from the earth and death will be destroyed forever. Yeshayahu 25:8. And all the work on the Torah and commandments, which are given to the whole world throughout the Shida Alfiai Shnei Deve Alma, 6,000 years of the world's existence, as well as to each individual during the 70 years of his life. Achieving a qualitative resemblance to the Creator, which was spoken of above. We have duly explained the process of the emergence and origin of the system of Haklipit. We have also duly explained the process of the emergence of the system of the Va Hatame, unclean powers, from the holiness of Him, which was necessary to accomplish with the help of them the creation of bodies, which afterward would correct the desire to receive, through the Torah and the commandments. And if they were not delivered to us, bodies with a spoiled desire to receive in them, through the system of uncleanness, then we would not have opportunity to correct it permanently, for there is no man who corrects that which he does not have. 13. However, we have yet to finally understand, given that the desire to receive for its own sake is so defective and corrupt, so how it arose and existed in the intent of creation, in Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, about of his oneness there can be no sound, utter, nor a word can be uttered. And the fact is that, indeed, as soon as he conceived to create Nashamat, souls, his intent became the power of causing, the practical realization of everything that he conceived, for he needs no instruments of action as we do, and directly, out of the intent, all souls and all worlds that shall only be created, filled with all the grace, pleasure, which he intended for them, including their final absolutely perfect state, which souls will attain at Gamma. Tikkun, at the end of the correction, that is, after the desire to receive that which is in the souls has already undergone complete and final correction. It has turned into its opposite, to become pure altruism, identical with Masel. And this is because he is timeless and the future, past and the present are used by him as one, and the future serves him as the present. And there are no time limitations inherent in him. Zohar, Mishpatim, Para. 51, the New Zohar, Bereshit, page 243. And so there was a desire to receive an Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, not at all spoiled, separated, from the Creator, but on the contrary, in a state of that very qualitative similarity, with him, which will be revealed in Gmar Tikkun, at the end of the correction, manifested immediately, since he is timeless. And this mystery was spoken of by our sages, may the blessed be the memory of them, in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, ch. 3, before the world was created, were he and his name one, for separation, from Creator. The inherent desire to receive was not revealed at all when souls appeared and were in the design of creation, but they were fused with him because of the qualitative similarity, which corresponds to the meaning of the words, he and his name are one. See in the doctrine of the 10 Sephirot to branch 1, of the tree of life of Arizal. 14. There you have it, in general terms. There must be 3 situations. The situation the first is the abiding, Neshamat, souls, in Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, in the conception of creation, and there they already exist in their future state in Gmar Taiken, at the end of the correction. The second situation is their being in the state of Shida Alfei Shnei, 6,000 years, when they are separated by using the two systems, worlds, of which discussed above, into Guf, body, and Nefesh, soul, and is given to them to work on the Torah and the commandments in order to turn the desire to receive, enclosed in them, into its opposite and bring it into a state of wanting to give pleasure to its creator and not themselves at all. And as long as they are in this situation, no correction of the bodies, but only of the souls, i.e., that is, they must eradicate from themselves any manifestation of receiving for the sake of themselves, which characterized as Guf, body, and remain in a state of only one altruistic desire. For such is the essence of the desire contained in souls. And even the souls of the righteous cannot enjoy themselves in the Garden of Eden after their death until their bodies are finally decayed and turned to ashes. The third situation is Gmar Hataiken, completion of the correction of the souls after the resurrection of the dead, for then they will achieve complete correction also for the bodies, because then they will have converted into their opposite. Receiving for its own sake is the essence of the body. Pure altruism will overcome this essence and they will become ready to receive for themselves all the grace, pleasure, and tenderness contained in the design of creation. And with all this, they will be honored with the unbreakable with their Creator, by virtue of their coincidence with Him. For they will acquire all these things not by their desire to receive, but by their desire to give pleasure to their Creator. He takes pleasure because they receive from Him. And for the sake of brevity, from here on I will refer to these three situations, that is, Matzav Aleph, situation 1, Matzav Beth, situation 2, and Matzav Gimel, situation 3, and you will remember everything that is explained about each and every state. 15. And when you consider these three situations, you will find that they are undoubtedly quite interdependent, so that if any one of them could disappear, then they would all disappear. For if, for example, the third situation had not placed, that is, the transformation of receiving into its opposite, altruism, then surely the situation could not have arisen the first, in Ein Sof Baruch who, in the infinite, for state of perfection arose there only because occur in the future in situation 3, it was already being used by the infinite in time as the present, and any state of perfection that can only be imagined in that very situation, first, is like a mapping from the coming to the present, existing there, and if no the future, there would be nothing there, existing in the present. For the situation of the third requires everything that exists in the situation of the first. Moreover, if anything were to disappear from situation 2, where all the work is done, which will lead to the attainment of perfection in situation 3, that is, work in states of spoiling and correction and a series of attractions, the various stages of Nashamat, souls, attraction. This means that the desire to receive initiates receiving light, i.e., pleasure, from the Supreme. Here, with altruistic motivation, then how would there be the third situation? For the situation the second requires a situation of the third. In addition, the existence of the situation of the first, in Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is already inherent in all perfection, observed, in situation 3, makes the existence of situation 1 in which all the perfection of situation 3 is already inherent, observed, makes it absolutely obligatory, that is, the second situation and the situation the third. That is, exactly in all the perfection that, observed, there, in Ein Sof, no less and not in any way more. For the first situation itself necessarily requires that the systems, of the pure and impure worlds, one against the other, and exist in the situation of the second, so that could exist a body with a desire to receive, spoiled by the system of impurity, and then we can correct it. And if there were no system of worlds of impurity, then we wouldn't have this desire to receive, and there would be no possibility to correct it and come to the situation of the third, for there is no man correcting what he does not have. For there is no question of how the system of impurity from the situation of the first, for, on the contrary, situation 1 requires it to exist and maintained, from above, in that state in the situation 2. 16. And the difficulty that arises is solvable. The difficulty, if so, we have no choice, God forbid. God forbid, for we are absolutely bound to reach perfection and get into the third situation, because of that it already exists in the situation of the first. The fact is that the Lord has prepared for us 2 ways in the situation of the second, in order to lead us to the situation the third. The first is the way of observing the Torah and keeping the commandments, as explained above. The second way is the way of suffering, where this suffering itself purifies the body and will eventually make us turn our desire to receive into it as opposite, so that it takes the form of altruistic desire, and cling to him. And this is in accordance with what our sages, may their memory be blessed, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin, p. 97b, quoted approximately, if you return to the path of righteousness, it is good, but if not, I will set over you a king like Haman, and he will force you to go back to the true way. And this is what they said, may their memory be blessed, concerning the verse in I will hasten it at the appointed time. Yeshayahu 60:22. If they are worthy, I will hasten it, and if they are not, it will happen, at an appointed time, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin, p. 98a. Explanation. If we deserve by following the first path, i.e., observing the Torah and keeping the commandments, then we hasten our correction and do not need heavy and bitter suffering and the long time it takes to accept them, so that we are compelled to return to the path of truth. If not, it will happen, at the appointed time, that is, only when the suffering will complete our correction and the time for us of forced correction. And the path of suffering as a whole also includes the punishments of souls in Gehenna. But anyway, Mar HaTaikin, the completion of correction, that is, the situation the third, will surely come, and it is foreordained by the situation of the first. And all of our choices are only choice between the way of suffering and the Torah and commandments, and it is now carefully explained how. These three situations in which souls find themselves are interrelated, and any one of them makes the others absolutely necessary. 17. And from what is explained, it is well understood how to solve the third difficulty given above. See question 3 in page 1. When we have difficulty to understand why, when we look at ourselves we find ourselves so depraved and disgusting that there are not more despicable, and when we look at the Creator, who created us, we conclude that we should have been at the very top step, for no one is capable of reaching his height, and, therefore, so befits the Creator, who created us. For it is in the nature of the perfect Creator to perform perfect acts. And from said above, it is well understood that this our body, for all that happens to it, and for all its unnecessary acquisitions, is not at all our true body. The true body is timeless, perfect in all kinds of perfection, already exists and resides in Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, in situation 1, where it takes that perfect form which it will take in the future in situation 3, that is the form of receiving, which is altruism, qualitatively identical with Ein Sof Baruch Hu. However, if our very being, in the situation of the first also entails the necessity to be given to us while in the situation, the second klipa, unclean shell, of this very our body, in its disgusting and spoiled form, for it represents the desire to receive solely for its own sake, which is the power that separates it from Ein Sof Baruch Hu, as it has been said above, to correct it and to give us the possibility of gaining our body beyond the control of time perfectly real, in the situation of the third, then we need not worry about it at all, since because our work can only be imagined with this temporal and perishable body, for no man fixes what he does not have. Thus, we are gaining perfection insofar as it is necessary, and as befits a perfect Creator, who created us, also in our present the situation of the second, since this body does not harm us not in the least, for it is to die and disappear, and it is only meant for us for a time, which we need in order to cease its existence, and to become timeless. 18. And at the same time this resolves difficulty 5, see question 5 in page 1, that is, we had difficult to understand how it could be that from existing outside of time came about creatures that are not characterized by independence of time, transient and perishable. And from what has been explained here, it is clear that, in fact, we are already descended from him himself, literally, from that, before his face, as it befits him, who is beyond time, that is, also, creatures, existing in all their perfection beyond of time, and this timeless existence of ours entails the necessity that klipat haguf. The unclean shell of the body, given to us only to work, is temporary and perishable, for if it would remain in our timeless existence, we would remain, God forbid, forever separated from the life of life. And we already said in paragraph 13 that our body, in the form of the desire to receive solely for its own sake, does not exist in the timeless design creation, for there we reside in the same form as we are in the situation of the third. However, in this form, we must necessarily have it when we are in situation 2, in order to give us to be able to correct its properties, as already stated. And there is no question of the situation in which the rest of the creatures of the world reside, outside of man, for man is the center of creation, as written below, in N. 39, and all other creations are not at all taken into account except insofar as they help to bring man to perfection, and therefore they rise and fall with him, and by themselves they are in no way taken into reckoning. 19. And this at the same time clarifies the difficulty of 4. See question 4 in N.1. That is, we have had difficulty to understand that since it is in the rule of the good to do good, how on earth did he originally create so many creatures who must suffer and suffer all their lives, for, as has already been said, all this suffering, necessarily arising from our situation first, where we are inherently independent from time, gained from the coming situation of the third, make us go either the path of Torah or the path of suffering, to come and reach our timeless state in situation 3, as described above, in page 15. And all of this suffering affects exclusively this klipat haguf shilana, the unclean shell of our body, created solely for death and burial, which teaches us that the desire to receive for its own sake, enclosed in it, is created solely for the purpose of erasing and remove it from the world and turn it into the opposite, altruistic desire. The suffering we undergo is revealed only to expose the nothingness and harm inherent in the desire to gain for its own sake. Come and see, it will now be shown, that if all the sons of the world would unanimously agree to eradicate and destroy the desire to receive for inherent in themselves, and they would have no desire but to do good to others, then all trouble and all blight from the earth would disappear, and everyone would be guaranteed a healthy and full-blooded life, for at the disposal of each one of us would have a great world that cares and meeting his needs. But when no one has anything but the desire to get for their own sake, that's where all the problems, the suffering, the wars, and the carnage, and we have no escape from them. For they wear out our bodies with all kinds of sicknesses and diseases. And so, it appears that all these sufferings that exist in our world are revealed to us, from above, and then appear before our eyes for the sole purpose of in order to induce us to destroy the evil klipat haguf, the unclean envelope of the body, and to attain perfection in altruistic desire. This is what we were talking about, that the very path of suffering is able to lead us to the desired state. And know that the commandments concerning human relationships take precedence over the commandments concerning the relationship between man and the one who takes into himself the whole world, for altruism toward neighbor leads man to altruism toward to him who takes the whole world into himself. 20. And after all that has been elucidated, we the answer to the first question, see page 1, in which we asked, what are we? Where we asked, what do we represent? For we represent the same thing as all parts of the object, which is no more and no less than a desire to receive, as stated above, in point 7, but not in the way that it is to us now, in the second situation, that is, not in the form of a desire to receive solely for the sake of itself. but in the form in which it resides and exists in the situation of the first, in Ein Sof Baruch Hu, in the infinite, that is, outside of time, namely as the desire to receive for the sake of giving a pleasure to its creator, as discussed above in N13. And although we have not yet reached in practice the situation of the third and are still, under the power of temporal limitations, nevertheless this does not diminish our essence at all, for our situation 3 is absolutely immanent for us by virtue of situation 1, so everything to be recovered under a debt obligation is like recovered. Babylonian Talmud, Treatises Katabat, p. 81a, Soda, p. 25a, Bava Metzia, p. 62a, Shavuot, p. 48b, Evamot 38b, Gittin 37a. Time constraints are regarded as a disadvantage only where there is some doubt whether a person will do what he has to do in the same time. Since we have no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it, because it's like as if we had already reached the situation of the third, and this the very body in its ominous form in which it given to us now, also does not diminish our essence, because it and all its acquisitions is to disappear altogether, together with the whole the system of uncleanness that is its source, and all that is to be burned is considered as having been burnt. Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Menachot, p. 102b, and it is also considered as if it had never existed. However, the soul, clothed in the body, also represents solely desire, only altruistic desire, and it is drawn to us from the system of the four worlds of Abya, Asalat, Bria, Yetzra, Asiya, holiness, as discussed in item 11 above. It is outside of time, because the essence of this altruistic desire qualitatively coincides with the life of life, and is not to be replaced at all. God forbid. And this theme concludes below, beginning with paragraph 32 and further.